All right, people. Hey, it's me, Moonbuster Green, and I just got out watching Beetlejuice, which is Beetlejuice times 2 because it's literally Beetlejuice 2, and I think the name is kind of stupid. So I'll just be calling the film Beetlejuice 2 for the rest of this review because I don't want to say Beetlejuice that many times in a single day. I feel like that's bad luck. Now, I enjoyed this movie. It's not perfect, but it's close to perfect. Though, in a nutshell, I think the biggest thing that held this movie off from being perfect was just Tim Burton was not awarded a big enough budget to do a Beetlejuice sequel justice. But despite that, it is his best movie in decades, and it is very wholly a Beetlejuice 2. Yeah, so this is definitely his best film in decades, best movie since, Corpse Bride. That was just a Nightmare Before Christmas clone, but at least it was like in his wheelhouse. Okay, I have to immediately spoil this movie. I'm sorry, I was trying to hold back a little bit longer, but here we go. So, I think the thing that this movie made me aware of was that maybe we've been too hard on Tim Burton, because I think he's been like held back and censored lately. I think what made me aware about this movie is Tim Burton works best when he's in a movie like Batman or Beetlejuice where he can just go full dark and twisted, because that's what he's famous for. He's famous for being a dark and twisted freak, and lately he's just been doing safe but weird Disney goth movies, and I think that's totally like ruined him. I think it's trapped him in this like hole of making kid content for Disney forever, and Disney has definitely been censoring him or otherwise holding him back from going full nuts and embracing his inner super freak, and that's what he does in this movie. In this movie, we finally see Tim Burton go full nuts for the first time in decades, and it's glorious. We got Danny DeVito here spewing bile just like he did in Batman Returns. We got Beetlejuice using his patented, sick, gross-out humor. There's a moment where Beetlejuice blows up real huge like that fat chick from Willy Wonka. And there's even a moment of on-screen hyper-pregnancy that I've never seen in a film like this before. I mean, maybe it was in Prometheus, but it's in this film and it's fucking sick. So yeah, thank God Tim Burton's back. If the man himself couldn't do this one right, I would have been like extremely concerned, because Beetlejuice is, by all accounts, Tim Burton's first and best film. It's like the most Tim Burton movie. It's like his pure original essence, like spilled out on the screen, and in many ways his entire career has both been defined by Beetlejuice as well as the sequel Beetlejuice 2, which has sort of been his white whale, the film he could never get quite right, and the film that he chased for 30 years. The film was originally announced almost immediately after the success of the first one back in 1989, but something just never coalesced and it never came together. Really, he got busy doing Batman, and then got busy doing a bunch of other shit, but it seems like what finally happened is around 2016, the regime at Warner Brothers gave Burton the same ultimatum that was given to Lily Wachowski, resulting in Matrix 4. We need you to make a sequel to this. We need it now. And either you're going to do it or we're going to have someone else you hate do it. So based on that, Burton finally agreed to do it. And it did take him another 10 years to actually get the job done. But here we are. It's finally done. All right, now let me do my usual thing I do in my reviews, where I just first talk about all the characters in the movie and how good or bad they were in the movie. This movie has a lot of characters, and I would definitely say it has too many characters. Now, that being said, I liked almost all the characters with one or two exceptions, so I think the big problem with this movie is it lacks a balance of the characters, and there are definitely characters who felt like they had bigger roles planned, but then they like cut all their content to just focus on Beetlejuice and Lydia. So yeah, character breakdown. First things first, I feel like I should acknowledge Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis, because they were bizarrely the main characters of the first film, even though no one really remembers them. But in this film, they've been fully taken out, and I'm satisfied with that. And even more satisfying is Lydia alludes that they're gone because she defined her skills as a medium and helped them pass on to, I guess, heaven. And there are a handful of Easter eggs and references to their actions in the first film, and I'm good with that. And yeah, I didn't want to see Alec Baldwin. He's not having a great year. Oh wait, he got away with that? Okay, maybe he is having a good year. Ha ha ha. All right. Anyway, also weirdly not in the movie that was in the first movie is Charles Dietz, Lydia's dad from the first movie, who was originally portrayed by Jeffrey Duncan Jones. Now, his character is very weirdly treated in the movie. Like, first he's an anime character, and then he appears as like a decapitated body, and his voice sounds exactly like the fake movie voice Mike from Red Letter Media does. Like, it's like, "Hello, kids, I'm Charles Dietz." Like, what the fuck? Did Mike actually do the voice? That's deep cut there. Yeah, so I was wondering what was up with this, and I thought they did it this way because Jeffrey Jones was dead, but no, I looked into it, and he's actually completely alive, but he's a registered, convicted sex offender who spent the mid-2000s totally predating after children, and yeah, that's horrible. This guy should really be in jail for the things he did, but weirdly enough, that information has seemingly been suppressed, and he was too rich, and even though he's been canceled from appearing in movies, he actually still works in TV to this decade. So yeah, Predator on the loose. I didn't know about that. That's nuts. Anyway, ignoring all that, the character of Charles Dietz is barely in the movie, and just in the movie as a weird joke non-character, acknowledging that his head was bent off. Now, moving on, we have Catherine O'Hara as Delia Dietz. Now, I forgot how weird she was in the first movie, but they brought her back in this one, and holy shit, she's just as weird, and she's amazing. I think she puts in, like, some of the hardest work alongside Michael Keaton, and holy shit, where's Catherine O'Hara been the past 20 years? Like, apparently she's been acting this whole time, but just doing, like, boring, serious roles, and they just haven't given her an acting role as juicy as Delia Dietz since Delia Dietz. Like, damn, man, I feel like they honestly wasted her life after this movie, because she's on fire. She gives a performance like I've never seen her before. She really brings her A game, and she's pretty much playing the same character she was in the first movie, but a little older, a little worse, a little bit more 2000s era Karen, and it fucking works, and I kind of love her after getting out of this. I really hope she gets to act in another role and do this much with it again, because, yeah, I just feel like, holy shit, where's she been all my life? Next up, we have Danny DeVito. He's got a 5-second cameo as, like, a janitor in hell, and it's just him but painted blue, and he's spewing bile or Drano or some shit. I guess when Tim Burton and Danny DeVito are together in a room, they just have to spew some bile together. All right, now I'll mention William Dafoe. So he's in this movie randomly as, like, a goofy ghost cop guy who's like the ghost of a dead actor who always wanted to be a cop, so he became a cop in the afterlife. Now, I kind of love Willem Dafoe in this movie. He's putting on an A-list, top-of-the-line Willem Dafoe performance, totally putting out his best here, and I actually like that he somewhat positions himself as like a polar opposite rival for Beetlejuice, like a good Beetlejuice. Like, they use a lot of the same terminology, and that, like, actually kind of thrilled me because he seems like this, like, anti-Beetlejuice, and he seems like he's also a little bit weaker than Beetlejuice. But yeah, he's a good guy. Beetlejuice is a bad guy. They're destined to fight. And I was pretty thrilled with his character and his whole, like, I'm gonna get Beetlejuice shtick. It also made him feel like a character who would have been like a one-off situational character in the Beetlejuice animated series. He does a couple of good things in the movie, but he's ultimately easily defeated and never seen again. But I at least like what he did in this movie, so I can't, like, say he, like, was a waste of time. All right, now let's move on to Jenna Ortega. I feel like I need to ask you as an audience member, do you like Jenna Ortega? Because I like her, but lately I keep talking to random people and they keep telling me that they hate her, and I don't get what the deal is. Maybe they're just racist against Mexican girls, but I think Jenna Ortega is pretty cool. Anyway, genuinely curious what people think of her, because I can't tell if she's a major rising movie star or if people are just mad at her for being the catch of the day. So that being said, while I love Jenna Ortega as an actress, as a person, I thought she was awesome in Wednesday. I'm not feeling her 100% in this movie. Like, I'm not fully pleased with the character they gave for in this movie, whose name is Astrid, and I'm going to call her Astrid going forward. Now, I didn't hate Astrid, but I feel like she's some kind of weird, like, logistics glitch, some kind of syntax error on Tim Burton's part, because she's mostly in the movie because Burton met her on Wednesday and, like, working with her and brought her along for the ride. But the thing is, like, she's ostensibly serving almost the same purpose and role that Lydia Dietz served in the first film, but then Lydia is also there, and Lydia has kind of evolved, and they clash. If anything, it's like old Lydia versus new Lydia, and I think if this movie was made 20 years ago, I feel like Lydia and Astrid's role would have just been the same character as just Lydia. And in a lot of ways, it also feels like Lydia and Astrid are so derivative of each other that it feels like Astrid is kind of like a spin-off of Lydia. It feels like Astrid is kind of there to handle all the plot lines that Lydia is just too old to realistically carry as, like, a 50-year-old woman. Like, I almost feel like there's an alternate reality here where Jenna Ortega is just playing Lydia Dietz, and this is a reboot of Beetlejuice, and maybe that would have been better than this, but I don't know, maybe if they ever get around to making Beetlejuice 3, they'll do something more substantial with her. But in this movie, she's totally just a supporting character, holding together a lot of the original Lydia's, like, role in the story. Anyway, it's funny to me, at least, to see the 3 different generations of Dietz women together and how they each develop this weird artistic punk style from their hatred and rebelling of the previous generation. I thought that was kind of cool, but they didn't really go into that enough. All right, next up, another completely useless character in this movie is Beetlejuice's ex-wife Dolores, played by Monica Bellucci. Now, this character is a really big red herring, and I honestly don't get her. She just kind of looks like the Bride of Frankenstein. She has this amazing introduction scene where she builds herself out of her scattered parts with a staple gun, but then that's kind of it, and that's really where her climax is in the film. Like, she peaks as soon as she's introduced. She's like this bad Halloween costume lady. She's out to kill Beetlejuice. She has the power to eat other ghosts, so she kills like 3 random minor ghosts who are all like blue-collar workers. And then when she finally gets to Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice one-hit KOs her. And yeah, they finally meet up at the end of the film, and Beetlejuice just destroys her instantly. Like, you barely learn anything about her except that she is the person who actually killed Beetlejuice when he was still alive, and she was trying to become immortal or something, so that's how she learned to eat ghosts. And yeah, so she has the power to kill ghosts, and maybe she was a witch because she was into magic. I don't know. They don't elaborate on it. Like, she barely talks aside from saying, "I'm gonna get that, Beetlejuice," and what? Okay, yeah, I don't think this character should have been in the film. I think she's literally just in there to be a hot Halloween costume. Next up is Arthur Conti in the film as Astrid's boyfriend. Now, there's a huge twist around this character that I'll get into later, and considering how the twist played out, I really wish the character had been developed more, because this is another character that's just kind of in the movie. He does a thing, and then he's quickly dismissed. Next up, Lydia has a fiance. She is engaged to a shitty con man named Rory. Now, Rory is an interesting character because he's oddly kind of a remix of the Otho Fenlock character from the first Beetlejuice. He has a lot of the same energy and a lot of the same wardrobe, and it's kind of funny and weird that Delia Dietz had this weird hipster social circle, and now that we've moved on to this movie, Lydia Dietz somehow has unwittingly put together almost the same crazy hipster social circle. I don't know what's up with that, but I kind of think it's an interesting concept, even if it is just echoing the first movie in a really unoriginal way. And so finally, I have to talk about the core of Beetlejuice, which is Beetlejuice and Lydia and their relationship. And there's so much to say here. So yeah, let's talk about both of them. I guess I'm going to start with Beetlejuice first, because overall, Beetlejuice was great in this movie. I have a few issues with him, but my issues with him are very straightforward. All right, first things first, I gotta fully recommend Michael Keaton. Like, he brought his A game here. He played the role with zero sense of time loss. Like, if you had told me that Michael Keaton filmed Beetlejuice, went to bed, and then woke up the next day and filmed Beetlejuice 2, I would have totally believed you. It's a borderline miracle that Michael Keaton is still at the top of his game at the age of 70, that he's still got the same level of comic timing, the physicality of it all. And with the makeup on, he looks exactly like he did 30 years ago, and that is outright outstanding. Keaton did a phenomenal performance as Beetlejuice. He deserves an Oscar for this. I guess my issues with Beetlejuice mostly come down to the story choices they made and the way they utilized Beetlejuice in the story. So, like, Beetlejuice hasn't changed since the first movie. He still wants to randomly marry Lydia, and he's got a picture of her from high school on his desk. It's a little bit creepy because he's like straight up stalking her, and he's been stalking her for apparently 50 years. Now, if you recall the first movie, Beetlejuice's plan was to A, marry Lydia, B, save the Maitlands from Delia's hipster friends who were killing them with weird pseudo-magic, and C, once he was done all that, he was going to marry Lydia, which would have given him some weird immunity in the ghost legal system and a pass to wreak havoc on the Earth and theoretically destroy or terrorize the human world. Presumably, he would go on a big bad chaos spree, and I assume in this movie that he still has that exact same plan. In this movie, he seems that he once again wants Lydia to randomly marry him, and it seems that his plan in this movie is A, marry Lydia, B, he's going to help save Astrid as a quid pro quo, and then C, I assume at the end, he will once again use the situation of their marriage to wreak non-stop havoc in the human world. Now, surprisingly, Beetlejuice in this movie is a little bit different from the one in the first movie. In that, in the first movie, I would say he was like lawful chaotic evil, and in this movie, he's more like lawful chaotic neutral. And he does some genuinely good things, like helping out Lydia, helping out Astrid, and he and Lydia go on an adventure together, and for just a moment, they almost channel that genuine friendship that Lydia and Beetlejuice had in the Ant-Man series. But in this movie, again, it's not a friendship, it's just a mutually beneficial quid pro quo. Now, that being said, it's still weird because Beetlejuice is a creep, and he's coming from a place of general unhelpfulness as far as Lydia concerned, even though he does have ulterior motives, seemingly. Although the ulterior motives were really only stated in the first film. So, like, in this film, like, I don't know, like, he's all over the place. He does traumatize her and force her to marry him again. It's a little bit weird that Beetlejuice is seemingly the end villain of this movie, despite the fact that all throughout the movie he's doing good things for Lydia and her family. And yeah, this movie is jam-packed with villains. It's got like 4 villains. 2 of the villains are Beetlejuice's villains. And okay, so like, here's the 2 things I hate about the Beetlejuice in this movie. Now, they're kind of minor, but in my book, one kind of ruins the character and the other one ruins the movie. So the first thing I hate about this movie, they randomly and semi-carelessly throw out Beetlejuice's origin story in the film, and I really hate it because what they explain is that Beetlejuice is the ghost of some kind of like a stable robber in like 14th century Spain, and yeah, I officially hate this. This just isn't as good as I wanted it. Like, it seems illogical. I don't get why he has like modern pop culture references now. And it was one of those things like explaining the origin of the Joker. The more you explain it, the worse it gets. It's better if you don't explain it. And yeah, just it makes the story worse explaining it. If they ever do Beetlejuice 3, I kind of hope they retcon this with him acting like the Joker and just like making up more origin stories that contradict each other, because it's really not necessary. The other thing is, like, at the end of the first movie, they established that Beetlejuice's whole thing is that when he comes to the human world, he has like this infinite power. So if I'm understanding that correctly, the only reason he had infinite power at the end of the first movie is because he got engaged to Lydia, and that seemingly increased his power, resulting in the climax of the first film, where he fully digivolves into his full carnival mode and either traumatizes or outright murders Delia's hipster friends, depending on your interpretation of what he did. The end of Beetlejuice 1 is pure cinematic magic, and if you take a step back and logistically look at it on paper, all that's really happening in the scene is Beetlejuice is unleashing his full power, but he's using it to destroy a dining room. That's it. Beetlejuice 1, one of the greatest films ever made. The climax of Beetlejuice 1 is Beetlejuice uses the infinite powers of an undead god to destroy a dining room. Now, seeing as this is Beetlejuice 2, a bigger and better Beetlejuice, I would have expected that Beetlejuice would either destroy the entire house or, hell, destroy the entire town. And either way, I wanted to see Beetlejuice use his crazy god powers again, like at the end of the climax of the first film. But unfortunately, he never has that godlike power in the sequel. He never has fucking crazy superpowers. He just has like the power to make people lip sync like fan dub. Now, he does accidentally unleash a bunch of shrunken head guys on the town, who lightly put some chaos into it, but those guys are almost entirely ignored because the movie takes place on Halloween and everyone thinks they're just cosplayers. And I really expected Beetlejuice to use like the powers he had in the first movie to turn like a snake, so I thought they would like double down on that and maybe turn into like a crocodile or something. Like, yeah, there was established shit in the first movie that Beetlejuice had all these like supernatural powers, and in this movie he just doesn't seem as powerful. He's just like a guy who, like, I don't know, he has like telekinesis and that's about it. So I don't know. I'm not sure if Tim Burton just like forgot to do that shit, or maybe he didn't have enough money to do it. I'm landing on he didn't have enough money to do it because Tim Burton's been on like a fail streak, and I don't think this movie was given the budget it deserved. But not getting to witness Beetlejuice's full power after all these years makes this film so underwhelming and makes me so angry, especially as the film goes on to establish that after the first movie, Beetlejuice pretty much turned into a hell of a boss and has been somehow vaguely, randomly assassinating people from hell for all these years. At least they got the Sandworm Planet again, and that was cool. All right, so that finally brings me to the biggest question mark of the film, the heart of the film, the heart of the original Beetlejuice, Lydia Deetz. So coming into this movie, time has not been kind to Lydia. Lydia in this movie is completely messed up. In fact, she's so messed up that I borderline thought that Winona Ryder herself was messed up. Like, I thought like Winona Ryder had like gone through like a terrible accident. Like, she has kind of a chain smoker voice, and she sounds really messed up. But then I checked the press tour interviews, and yeah, she's talking normal in those. She's talking normal in Stranger Things. So thank God Winona Ryder is normal. She's just doing some shockingly great acting in this film to portray an older and messed up version of Lydia Dietz. And yeah, Lydia Dietz apparently had this bizarre downfall. You get a sense of her entire life post Beetlejuice 1, like, we're rejoining her at a major low point in her life. Lydia went from a 14-year-old goth girl superhero to a 50-year-old washed-up TV psychic drug addict, and it's a massive downfall. I have a feeling Lydia's arc in this movie is going to be majorly controversial to some people. It's a really weird choice, making her this like washed-up main character, but considering the only two versions of Lydia we'd had before were the original goth girl damsel in distress in the first movie and the witch girl girl boss from the cartoon, I guess washed up drug addict Lydia is an interesting choice. Like, the more I consider it, it's interesting. It's not the worst choice. It's not as bad as like washed up Jake Skywalker in The Force Awakens. If anything, it's Jake Skywalker if Jake Skywalker had at least been the main character of the movie and Rey hadn't been there. But yeah, so this movie is centered on Lydia, and I guess in some ways the adventure is about straightening her life out, and weirdly Beetlejuice helps her do that, which again puts Beetlejuice in this like lawful, chaotic, neutral state. Her fiancé Rory is a total negative influence on her. He's keeping her drugged up, and he's revealed at the climax of the film to just be a gold digger. It's weird though. If anything, Lydia's arc, it feels a little bit incomplete, and I kind of feel like where they're going with it, if they do make a Beetlejuice 3, it seems like she's coming around on Beetlejuice, and I really thought at the end of this movie she might actually end up marrying Beetlejuice. Like, the movie has this really weird cliffhanger ending. Like, if anything, it really seems like they are holding out for a Beetlejuice 3. And right now, I'm calling it that if they do make a Beetlejuice 3, I think it's going to presumably end with Lydia dying and then finally marrying Beetlejuice for real, because she had no serious reason to marry Rory and was just kind of going along with it because she was like in a drug-induced stupor. But she has just as little serious reason to marry Beetlejuice, and she kind of didn't seem all that opposed to that either. All right, anyway, let me fully go over the movie now, because there's a lot I need to talk about, and it kind of doesn't make sense unless I lay out like the beats of the movie. All right, so this is a weird movie. It checks in on Lydia Dietz 30 years after the end of Beetlejuice 1, and she's become this weird drug-addicted ghost talk show host lady. Basically, she's a few steps down from Elvira combined with Miss Cleo, and it's weird. Like, what's interesting is they fill in a lot of the gaps about Lydia's backstory between the movies, and it feels like after the end of the first movie, her ability to see dead people only got stronger, allowing her to fully take on work as a spirit medium, but then eventually she sold out and became like a hokey talk show host. Also, again, Lydia's kind of weird. It's like at points she's wearing an outfit that almost looks like the schoolgirl costume she wore in the first movie. And part of me thinks that that's just like nostalgia because that's the way Lydia looked in the first movie. But then another part of me thinks that maybe that is actually some like bold character decision because she's like literally like trapped in like the mind of a teenager in the body of a 50-year-old woman. But anyway, so yeah, she hooked up with this activist Spanish guy. She gave birth to Astrid. Eventually, him and her split up because of how much of a messy girl failure she became. And then hilariously, he was eaten by piranhas because there's a weird running gag in this movie where everyone's husband is eaten by a sea creature. Now, anyway, yeah, considering all that, Lydia is hooked on pills at the start of the movie, and Astrid is keeping her distance from her. And I mean, by all accounts, Astrid is justified because it sounds like between Lydia's weird TV sellout situation and the pills, like Lydia's kind of ruined her life and is taking Astrid down with her. And Astrid is really justified, and I feel for her at the start of the film. Like, the weird balance between Astrid and Lydia is so complicated because I really still want to believe in Lydia Dietz. She was like a childhood hero of mine. But at the same time, Astrid has kind of inherited almost all of Lydia's positive traits, and Lydia herself has taken on these new negative ones. Anyway, one day Lydia randomly starts seeing Beetlejuice again, which is never fully explained. She's definitely seeing Beetlejuice at certain points in the movie, but it's also very possible that at the earlier parts of the film, she might just be seeing him directly as a result of her drug addiction or otherwise as like a paranoid PTSD illusion because of the events of the first movie. And they totally play that up because that's what Rory says is going on, and maybe he's right, maybe he's not, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, at the start of the film, Charles Dietz dies. He dies in a weird claymation cartoon that looks straight out of Pee-wee's Playhouse where a shark eats him. And then he goes to the Netherworld without a head, and he has the voice of the Red Letter Media guy, and I'm not sure what's up with that. Catherine O'Hara is reintroduced. She's awesome. And then we get a bunch of stupid shit about how Beetlejuice has this evil Frankenstein ex-wife that's totally just filler. It's like a filler plot, and ultimately it doesn't go anywhere, and I feel like a waste of time that it was even this movie. I would have much preferred there be more Lydia and Beetlejuice hanging out and less of her. Eventually, Rory tries to force Lydia into a shotgun marriage at her father's funeral because he's a gold digger, and I assume at this point Rory is trying to marry her before the inheritance check clears, and they're also trying to sell the house from the first movie, so maybe he also wants a cut of that fine real estate check. Anyway, Astrid tries to stop her from going along with this because she can see how transparently stupid it all is, but Lydia awkwardly gets conned into it because she's just too drug addicted to care in the end. So Astrid runs off with Lydia's old bike. She goes on a joyride. This is actually a pretty fun scene. It's very Pee-wee, and she ends up crashing it into one of those random handsome boys in a treehouse with a taste for vintage things that is in every teenage movie. So yeah, Astrid and this handsome teenage boy end up dating a whole lot, which is weird because supposedly Astrid is just in the town for a single week for the funeral, and she notices that this boy has a copy of the Afterlife rulebook for the first movie, which he very coolly covers that he got in a yard sale. Now this moment super threw me off, because I thought he was being honest here, and maybe Lydia or Delia had sold a copy of the book that the Maitlands had left behind. But as it turns out, it's not their copy. It actually is his, because he's a goddamn ghost. Unexpected twist. And then in a twist on the twist, it turns out that he's actually the ghost of a teenage serial killer who killed his parents. Bum bum bum. And he's also planning to steal Astrid's soul and take over her body or bring himself back to life or some shit like that. They don't really fully explain well how it works, but he's going to trade her life for his in a passport office, and that's his big plan. I guess it's a little similar to Beetlejuice's plan from the first movie, just not as good, not as original, not as clever. And yeah, why didn't he just do Beetlejuice's plan from the original movie? I guess he wanted to fuck her over. Anyway, so Astrid gets conned into all that, and then Lydia and Beetlejuice end up teaming up to save her, which is honestly a pretty good premise for this movie. However, the movie wastes that good premise, and I want to say it's very light on the adventure aspects, and that's a huge loss to the movie, because I really did want to see a good old-fashioned Beetlejuice-Lydia adventure where they go to the Netherworld together like the old cartoon, but instead all you get is they run through a single hallway, then Beetlejuice suddenly acts like a Chad hero, and then it's over and they go back to the human world. One thing that is super weird, though, and one thing that's sure to be a big controversy in the future. So they explain in this movie that to transfer from the Netherworld to heaven or hell, you have to take a ride on the Soul Train. And this ends up being a really hilarious joke that it's the super racist disco Soul Train from the 1970s public access TV show Soul Train, where a bunch of people just dance to disco. And also every single person on the Soul Train is black because, famously Soul Train was a show made by black people in the 70s. Now, the reason why this is sure to be controversial is that Tim Burton has kind of a bad record and has gotten constant shit in the past for not having black people in his movies, or when he does, he only gives them the worst, most degrading roles. This has happened time and time again, and it was previously a really big controversy when Dumbo came out because he cut the crows out of Dumbo, and they were the only black characters in the movie. And I think he's definitely going to be hot water again for pulling this joke, although it is a very stupid joke. I feel like someone's going to call him out as racist for doing it, and I'm going to be waiting to see that. I feel like the joke wouldn't have been so racist if there was just another character with the Soul Train who was maybe a famous and respected black character. But no, everyone on the Soul Train is just a faceless black extra. Yeah, Beetlejuice finds Astrid's boyfriend and sends him straight to hell. I really quick want to mention the boyfriend character was also not fleshed out well, and I really thought that after he took a heel turn, he would maybe turn into a monster in the way Alec Baldwin did in the first movie. But no, they completely underutilized that character, and they just kill him off very fast. Anyways, then Beetlejuice rescues Delia again, who died a super comedic joke death by buying a poisonous snake, asking the pet shop guy to take the poison out of it, and then surprise, he didn't do that because you can't do that, and it was still poisonous and it killed her. You just can't pay people to take poison out of snakes. That's not how snakes work. Anyway, so yeah, the film climaxes at Lydia's wedding to Rory. Only then Beetlejuice takes the wedding over. exposes Rory as a gold digger fraud, once again in Beetlejuice doing kind of a good thing for Lydia, but then he attempts to marry Lydia himself. And so, once again, I was very let down by the climax of the film because it lacks the scale and the budget and the imagination of the climax of the original film, where Beetlejuice turns into a walking humanoid circus and uses the powers of a circus to kill all those hipsters. The closest thing to it is he fuses the wedding audience with their cell phones, but this is like a one and done, cheap, nasty looking CGI joke, and it like only lasts a minute. It's not the full climactic spectacle we got in the first movie. Now, after that, we go into the wedding sequence, and this is another one of those moments like the first movie where Beetlejuice forces people to do a lip sync dub of a classic song. In the first movie, it was Daylight Come and We Want to Go Home. And in this movie, it's MacArthur Park by Richard Harris. Now, this is a really interesting climax for this film. Initially, when this sequence started, I was very disappointed. I was like, oh, it's the same thing as the first movie, but slightly different. Now, then about 3 minutes into the sequence, I was kind of bored with it and kind of over it. But the thing I forgot is MacArthur Park is one of those crazy, ultra-long songs from the 1960s, and the full version of MacArthur Park is a whopping 7 minutes long. And by God almighty, Tim Burton squeezed all 7 minutes of the original full-length MacArthur Park into the climax of this film and made a full musical final confrontation between Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice's wife, Willem Dafoe's ghost cop character, and I want to say that by the 5th minute mark up until the 7th minute mark, I changed my mind about MacArthur Park. I went all in on MacArthur Park because Tim Burton stuck to the bit long enough that it impressed me and it changed my mind and it made me like it. Now, that is unfortunately the climax of the film. The film climax is on everyone singing MacArthur Park. But it's a good vibe. Like, it has like the vibe of like when The Mask forced everyone to sing Cuban Pete. But then after that, Lydia just talks her way out of the wedding and makes Beetlejuice explode with some more random body inflation crap, and that's it. Now, after that, they go into a really weird, kind of messy ending where I think Beetlejuice put a dream sequence inside of Lydia, and then the ending is Lydia having that dream sequence. So, like, by all accounts, the ending of the film is actually so unclear that I'm actually not sure how the movie actually ended. It's actually got this really vague ending because Beetlejuice like inceptions Lydia to have this nightmare dream sequence where she thinks everything worked out. But if Beetlejuice did inception her like that, then maybe things didn't work out and maybe Beetlejuice actually did win. Anyway, yeah, the ending of the film is actually confusing, but a good confusing. Like, it's very much the ending of Inception. I guess all it does imply at the end is that this is not over and they really do have to make a Beetlejuice 3 to clarify what happened at the end. So overall, like, I guess this is the best Tim Burton movie in 20 years, and I would say it's just as good as, if not a little bit worse than the first Beetlejuice. If you hated the first Beetlejuice, don't watch this. You're not going to like this. It's just a worse update on it, but I don't know. I just feel like they didn't go hard enough on the budget, and I gotta blame that to just Tim Burton's like string of like failures lately. I really would have preferred it if they just had a single moment where Beetlejuice goes full power nuts, like the end of the first movie. If they had that, I would have been so happy. Or at the very least, they could have had like a little bit more of him hanging out. I also would have accepted that. But that's about where I'm at with it. It's an overstuffed movie, but it's still pretty good. I guess I'm going to give Beetlejuice an 8 out of 10 for the reasons that I was so impressed by the stuff they got right. Pros, Tim Burton is at his best in like 20 years. I'm also shocked that Michael Keaton looks the same way he did 30 years ago. Cons, super mad Beetlejuice didn't go full power at the end. Kind of mixed on Lydia's drug addict arc. And the film kind of lacks a major climactic spectacle, which again ties into the whole full power thing. So sorry I haven't been putting out as many videos lately, but I've gone back to work this week. And also I'm full on Gundam Breaker lately because Gundam Breaker 4 is just a satisfying place for me to exist lately. All right, thank you everybody. Yeah, let me know what you think. Leave a comment, subscribe. Happy birthday. Good night.